The office hummed with the usual drone of fluorescent lights and the soft rustle of papers, but beneath that veneer of monotony, a current of unrest stirred. Mythic sat at her cluttered desk, her brightly colored hair a stark contrast to the grey cubicles around her. She tapped her pen against a sketchbook filled with whimsical doodles, dragons wearing business suits, clocks melting into coffee cups, and a particularly cheeky unicorn balancing precariously on a tightrope. Today, however, her doodles were more than mere distractions. They were blueprints for rebellion. With a sly grin, Mira pulled out a form labeled Request for Exceptional Absurd Phenomena and began to fill it out. Unlike the usual mundane applications, hers described a reverse unicorn parade, a spectacle where unicorns would unwalk their usual routes in reverse order, creating a cascade of magical confusion that defied every regulation Harold Pindle had ever enforced. The form was dotted with colorful annotations and sealed with an enthusiastic flourish. As she slid the form across to the supervisor's desk, a hush fell over the nearby clerks who watched the unfolding scene with barely concealed amusement. Harold's slicked-back grey hair seemed to bristle as he adjusted his oversized spectacles, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Miss Tock," he began, voice dripping with officious severity, "you are aware that such a request violates protocol for 7B, subsection 12, relating to the orderly conduct of magical creature movement." Mira met his gaze, undeterred. "Yes, Mr. Pindle, but isn't the whole point of the Bureau to manage the impossible? Perhaps sometimes the impossible needs a little improvisation." Harold's jaw tightened. Improvisation leads to chaos. Chaos leads to the unraveling of the regulatory fabric we so painstakingly maintain. And what if that fabric is meant to be a little unraveled? Mira shot back, her eyes sparkling with defiance. At that moment, Eliza Quill, seated a few desks away, observed the exchange with a mixture of bemusement and something more complex curiosity, perhaps. Her ink-stained fingers drummed lightly on the edge of a stack of time travel licenses, the latest batch riddled with paradox warnings and temporal anomalies. Usually, she maintained a pragmatic, almost cynical distance from the chaos that Myra seemed to court so eagerly. But today, Eliza found herself wondering if there was merit in embracing the unpredictable, in letting the absurd have its moment to breathe. The tension between Harold and Myra was soon interrupted by an unexpected commotion. A sudden influx of misplaced Monday requests flooded the system, triggering a cascade of absurd malfunctions. Calendars on every desk flipped backward, clocks chimed 13 times at irregular intervals, and a soft, disorienting hum filled the air as glitching absurdity machines sputtered and sparked. Mira laughed, a bright, uninhibited sound that cut through the office's usual sterility. See, a little chaos can be quite invigorating. Harold, however, was not amused. He scrambled to contain the malfunction, barking orders and waving a clipboard as if it were a magic wand that could restore order. Eliza, caught between the two, felt the stirrings of change within herself, reluctant acknowledgement that the Bureau's rigid rules might need bending if nonsense was to survive. The day closed with the clerks exhausted but strangely enlightened. Mira's rebellion had ignited a spark, Harold's defenses had been cracked, and Eliza's doubts had begun to bloom into possibility. Somewhere in the mingled scent of ink, paper, and flickering fluorescent light, the Bureau of Absurd Affairs danced its delicate dance once more between order and chaos, sense and nonsense, the known and the impossible. And as the last clock chimed into the twilight hour, the question lingered in the air: could the Bureau truly regulate absurdity without losing its soul? The answer, like all things in this peculiar place, remained delightfully uncertain. The morning began like any other within the sterile, fluorescent-lit confines of the Bureau of Absurd Affairs. Harold Pindle was already at his desk, meticulously aligning a fresh stack of unicorn parking permits with an almost reverential precision. His slicked-back grey hair caught the dim light, and his oversized spectacles perched precariously at the bridge of his nose as he squinted at the fine print. The quiet hum of the office was punctuated only by the faint rustling of papers and the occasional distant whinny that seemed to echo from beyond the bureau's glass walls. Permit number 4723, Zone 7B, expires at midnight, Harold muttered under his breath, tapping a sharpened pencil against the desk. No deviations allowed. Across the room, Miratok bounced in her chair, eyes darting between her sketchbook and the flickering monitor displaying real-time unicorn parking statistics. Her brightly colored hair was a kaleidoscope of neon blues and pinks, mismatched clothes forming a vibrant counterpoint to the office's drab grays. She doodled absent-mindedly unicorns prancing, tangled in traffic cones, or perched awkwardly atop parking meters, each stroke infused with a playful irreverence. Eliza Quill, meanwhile, sat poised at her workstation, her short-cropped dark hair framing a face etched with quiet pragmatism. Her perpetually ink-stained fingers tapped rhythmically on her keyboard as she reviewed time travel licenses, occasionally glancing toward Harold with a raised eyebrow. The tension in the air was palpable, though the source remained frustratingly elusive. Suddenly, a faint shimmer outside caught Eliza's attention. She rose from her chair and peered through the glass partition that separated the bureau from the bustling city streets. There, in the early morning light, an iridescent horn glistened unmistakably, a unicorn. Then another, and another. Soon, a cluster of these magical creatures filled the sidewalks, some nervously shifting their hooves, others flicking their manes in confusion. "That can't be right," Eliza murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Back at his desk, Harold's face drained of color as he frantically rifled through permit files. No, this is impossible. The quotas were carefully calculated. There's no way we authorized this many unicorns at once. Myra's eyes sparkled with mischievous delight. Looks like someone's not following the rules. Or maybe the rules just aren't enough. Harold shot her a glare. Rules are the only thing keeping this place from descending into chaos. Outside, the city's rhythm stuttered. Pedestrians stopped to gape at the unauthorized unicorns, some reaching out in wonder, others stepping back in alarm. The creatures, for their part, seemed just as bewildered by the sudden influx of their kind, their magical auras flickering uncertainly. The scene quickly escalated into a spectacle. A particularly elegant unicorn, its coat shimmering with a pearlescent sheen, found itself tangled in a cluster of street signs, its glowing permit tag dangling loosely from its neck. Nearby children pointed excitedly, while adults scrambled for their phones to capture the unfolding chaos. Back inside the bureau, the phone lines buzzed incessantly. Reporters clamored for statements, city officials demanded explanations, and Harold's usual composure gave way to a frazzled desperation. He barked orders, attempting to coordinate a response, but the sheer scale of the crisis overwhelmed even his fastidious nature. Into this maelstrom strode Juno Sparks, the bureau's most relentless investigative journalist. Her short red hair was tousled from the brisk morning air, and her leather jacket bore the marks of countless urban adventures. Her camera clicked sharply as she scanned the frantic office, her sharp gaze settling on Harold. "Care to explain how your unicorn permit system ended up causing a citywide magical traffic jam?" she asked, voice dripping with sardonic amusement. Harold adjusted his spectacles, cheeks flushed. I assure you, Ms. Sparks, we are doing everything within our power to rectify this situation. These are unprecedented circumstances. Juno smirked. Unprecedented or not, the public deserves answers, and I intend to get them. Mira, ever the free spirit, sidled up to Juno with a mischievous grin. Maybe it's time the Bureau loosened up a bit. Rules can't contain everything, you know. Eliza watched the exchange silently, her mind racing. The overbooking crisis was more than a bureaucratic hiccup. It was a symptom of a deeper imbalance between the rigidity of regulation and the wild unpredictability of nonsense itself. Throughout the day, the Bureau became a hive of frenzied activity. Staff scrambled to issue emergency permits, redirect unicorns, and manage public relations. Felix Grimble popped in briefly, his colorful bow tie almost blending with the swirling chaos, offering cryptic advice about magical flow and the art of letting go. Harold, usually unshakable in his devotion to procedure, found himself questioning the inflexibility he had always championed. Myra's exuberance and Juno's probing questions chipped away at his certainty, revealing cracks in the veneer of control. By evening, the city's streets had cleared of unauthorized unicorns, the crisis seemingly contained. Yet the Bureau's halls echoed with uneasy silence. The overbooking had exposed vulnerabilities and sparked debates that would ripple through the organization for weeks to come. Eliza gathered the clerks for a brief meeting. We must reconsider how we regulate nonsense, she said, her voice steady but tinged with newfound resolve. If we cling too tightly to rules, we risk breaking the very magic we aim to protect. Harold nodded slowly, the weight of the day's events settling upon him. Perhaps there is room for flexibility. Mira grinned, and a little chaos never hurt anyone. Outside, as twilight deepened, the city settled back into its peculiar rhythm. The Bureau of Absurd Affairs standing at the brink of transformation. Somewhere in the distance, the faintest hint of a unicorn's whistle echoed an enduring reminder that even in the most ordered systems, absurdity finds a way to dance. The chapter closes with the Bureau facing an uncertain future, where the balance between order and chaos must be carefully negotiated. The question lingers: can the bureaucrats adapt quickly enough to embrace the unpredictable magic they regulate before the next crisis erupts? The humming of machines filled the cramped back room of the Bureau of Absurd Affairs, a low mechanical drone punctuated by the occasional spark and clatter. Nina Voss crouched near a sputtering device, her grease-smeared fingers deftly manipulating wires and gadgets that defied ordinary logic. The absurdity machine, one of several designed to calibrate and regulate time travel permits, had been malfunctioning for days, causing delays and paradoxical glitches in the city's temporal bureaucracy. Eliza Quill stood beside her, clutching an ink-stained logbook, her glasses perched precariously on the bridge of her nose. Her short-cropped dark hair was slightly tousled, a testament to the long hours spent chasing the elusive balance between order and chaos. As Nina fiddled with a frayed cable, Eliza's sharp eyes scanned the latest anomaly reports, searching for patterns in the madness. If this machine shorts out again, Nina muttered, we might have a temporal cascade on our hands. Imagine the paperwork for that. She offered a wry smile, but her hands betrayed her concern as they carefully adjusted a blue glowing coil. Eliza sighed, recalling the incident from last week when a misplaced Tuesday had caused 3 clients to show up simultaneously in the past, present, and future. It's a wonder the city hasn't folded in on itself yet, she said, quoting softly from an obscure, absurdist text she'd read years ago. Chaos is a kind of order, but this is just sloppiness. Nina glanced up, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Maybe sloppiness is the best kind of order we've got. Their tentative camaraderie was interrupted by a knock on the door. Carl Tannen entered, his conservative suit slightly rumpled, a stack of legal documents clutched tightly in one hand. His stern face bore the marks of many sleepless nights spent drafting regulations that tried to cage the wild, unpredictable phenomena the Bureau oversaw. "Eliza," he began, his voice clipped, "we need to discuss the latest revisions to the temporal licensing guidelines. The current wording is too vague, allowing for too much interpretive leeway. We cannot afford such ambiguity." Eliza nodded, but her eyes flickered toward Nina, who gave a subtle shrug. Fixing a machine was one thing. Rewriting the rules that governed nonsense was another entirely. Later, in the dimly lit conference room, Carl stood before a whiteboard cluttered with diagrams and legalese. Harold Pindle, the Bureau's obsessive supervisor of unicorn parking permits, sat stiffly at the table, his oversized spectacles reflecting the fluorescent light. His suit was a size too large, his slicked back grey hair immaculate, but his expression increasingly anxious. "These proposed changes," Harold said nervously, tapping his pen against a sheaf of forms, "will open loopholes that could be exploited. Unicorns might park wherever they please, and time travel could become a free-for-all. We must maintain strict control." Carl's eyes narrowed. "Harold, the rigidity of your approach is precisely what's causing these paradoxes. We need flexibility to accommodate the unpredictable nature of nonsense." Harold's face flushed. Flexibility is a euphemism for chaos. Eliza, seated quietly at the back, watched the exchange with a mix of exasperation and amusement. The clash of personalities was as much a part of the Bureau's ecosystem as the absurd phenomena they regulated. Back in the workshop, Nina and Eliza tested the recently repaired machine. As it hummed steadily, emitting a soft blue glow, the tension in the room eased. "Looks like we're back in business," Nina said, wiping her hands on a rag. Eliza smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in days. "For now, but the machines are only part of the equation. The rules, the people, everything has to align. Otherwise, the whole thing unravels." Their brief moment of hope was tempered by the knowledge that the Bureau's delicate machinery, both literal and figurative, was under constant threat from within and without. Harold's inflexibility, Carl's legal labyrinth, and the ever-creeping chaos of nonsense meant that every day was a battle to keep absurdity from spilling into anarchy. As the day wore on, Harold returned to his office, flustered and clutching his documents. Carl followed, ready to continue their endless debate over bureaucratic minutiae. Eliza remained behind, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm on her desk, already contemplating the next challenge. In the Bureau of Absurd Affairs, the dance between order and chaos played out not just in the phenomena they regulated, but in the hearts and minds of the clerks who managed the impossible. And as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, one thing was certain: the absurdity was far from over. The fluorescent lights of the Bureau of Absurd Affairs flickered sporadically, casting long, jittery shadows across the endless rows of filing cabinets and permit shelves. Somewhere, deep within the vault of time travel licenses, a soft, irregular pulse echoed faintly, hum out of sync with the steady drone of bureaucracy. Eliza Quill stood before a translucent display panel, her glasses fogged slightly from hours spent hunched over documentation. Her fingers, perpetually ink-stained from the mountain of paperwork she managed, hovered hesitantly over the controls. The rogue license was an anomaly, a wild card threatening the delicate weave of nonsense the Bureau so painstakingly maintained. "Look at this," Eliza murmured, bringing the flickering license into sharp focus. The edges shimmered erratically, the dates and timestamps spinning in impossible loops. It's generating a paradox one that's bleeding into other permits. If it spreads, the entire system could collapse. Nina Voss appeared at her side, her tool belt jangling softly as she carried a compact diagnostic device. "I've been tracking glitches in the absurdity machines," she said, voice tight with concern. "This license is triggering malfunctions across multiple departments. Time travel permits are becoming unstable, and the machines that regulate them are overheating." Eliza nodded, her mind racing. "We need to isolate it, but the system's architecture wasn't built for this kind of anomaly. It's like trying to patch a crack in reality with duct tape." Felix Grimble shuffled in, spectacles perched precariously low on his nose. "I might have something," he said, fingers twitching as if conjuring magic from thin air. Old records hint at a similar event decades ago, though the details are sparse. If we can find the original containment protocols, there might be a way to stabilize the paradox. The three of them gathered around a cluttered desk, papers and glowing tablets strewn about like the remnants of a storm. Felix pulled out a dusty, leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed and curling. "Here," he said, pointing to a cryptic entry, "the temporal anomaly directive. It's incomplete, but it suggests using synchronized absurdity pulses to neutralize paradoxical energy." Nina frowned. "Our absurdity machines can generate those pulses, but they're delicate and prone to failure. We'd need to recalibrate the entire network to respond in unison." Eliza's gaze hardened with resolve. "Then that's what we'll do. This bureau exists because nonsense needs rules, but sometimes the rules need to bend. Let's get to work." The next hours blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Nina crawled beneath humming consoles, her hands deftly rewiring circuits and adjusting flux capacitors devices that looked suspiciously like overgrown toaster ovens patched with bits of clockwork. Felix flitted between filing cabinets and arcane tomes, muttering fragments of forgotten spells that seemed to spark faintly in the sterile air. Eliza coordinated their efforts, issuing crisp commands while mentally calculating the ripple effects of every adjustment. As the synchronized absurdity pulse built momentum, the rogue license's erratic glow began to pulse in time, its chaotic energy slowly corralled by the Bureau's makeshift containment field. The hum grew louder, a rising crescendo that filled the vault with a tangible vibration. Suddenly, the flickering license stabilized, its edges solidifying into a coherent timestamp. The paradox was contained. Eliza exhaled deeply, the weight of relief washing over her. "It's not perfect," she admitted, "but it's enough to hold for now. We need to investigate how the license went rogue in the first place." Felix nodded, adjusting his bow tie with a wry smile. "And I suspect this is only the beginning. The fabric of nonsense is fraying, and we're the only ones who can mend it." Outside the vault, the Bureau's main office buzzed with renewed energy. Clerks, who had been paralyzed by fear and confusion, now rallied around Eliza's calm leadership. Harold Pindle, ever anxious but dutiful, paced nervously, muttering about regulations and protocol breaches. Despite his unease, he recognized the necessity of the team's unconventional methods. Eliza caught his eye and offered a small, reassuring smile. "We'll get through this," she said quietly. "The Bureau always does." But as the hum of the machines resumed its steady rhythm and the glow from the rogue license dimmed to a harmless pulse, an unspoken question hung in the air. How many more paradoxes lurked in the shadows, waiting to unravel the absurd order they had sworn to protect? The fragile balance between absurdity and reality was under threat. The Bureau of Absurd Affairs was its last, best defense. The Bureau of Absurd Affairs had always been a peculiar place in Ireland, where nonsense was not only tolerated, but meticulously catalogued, regulated, and, above all, controlled. Yet, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights and the endless clatter of typewriters and keyboards, a quiet storm was brewing. It began with whispers, subtle hints exchanged in hushed tones behind closed doors and flickering computer screens showing lines of code that should never have been tampered with. Eliza Quill sat at her cluttered desk, the glow of her monitor casting sharp shadows on her ink-stained fingers. She was reviewing time travel license applications when a faint murmur drifted through the corridor. Curiosity pricked at her, and she glanced up just in time to catch a glimpse of Harold Pindle slipping into the shadowed hallway opposite her office. Eliza's brow furrowed. Harold was the epitome of bureaucratic devotion, meticulous, rule-bound, and unwaveringly loyal to the Bureau's procedures. But lately, something was different. There was a nervous energy about him, a furtive edge that unsettled even her cynical heart. Drawn by a mix of concern and suspicion, Eliza edged closer to the corridor's entrance, her footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet. There, in the dim light, Harold was engaged in a low conversation with a figure cloaked in shadow, unmistakable presence of cold authority. The figure's mirrored mask reflected the flickering light, obscuring all but a hint of a smirk. "The auditor, you understand the stakes, Harold." The auditor's voice was low, measured, yet possessed of an icy certainty. "Nonsense is a cancer on progress. Your cooperation will ensure a future free of chaos." Harold swallowed hard, adjusting his ill-fitting suit, his spectacles catching the light in a way that betrayed his inner turmoil. I only want what's best for the Bureau," he murmured. "Order must prevail." Meanwhile, elsewhere in the Bureau, Mythic was staging a different kind of rebellion. Her brightly colored hair was a beacon of whimsy in the sterile halls as she rallied a small but growing group of clerks and visitors alike. Armed with her ever-present sketchbook, she was crafting banners and slogans that celebrated the very absurdity the Bureau sought to regulate. Why should misplaced Mondays be shoved into forgotten corners? Mira proclaimed, her voice ringing with youthful passion. Why can't nonsense be free? It's the pulse, the heartbeat of creativity. Her words resonated. The lobby, usually a place of quiet efficiency, was alive with a buzz of excitement. The walls, once a monotonous grey, were now decorated with colorful drawings of improbable creatures and impossible events. A visual manifesto of resistance against the suffocating grip of bureaucracy. Not far from the growing protest, Juno Sparks occupied a cramped newsroom, her fingers flying over a keyboard as she pieced together a story that could shatter the Bureau's carefully maintained facade. Her red hair was aflame in the dim light, her leather jacket draped over the back of a chair littered with papers and coffee cups. Hidden files, crooked permits, and secret deals, Juno muttered, eyes narrowing. The public deserves to know what really goes on behind these walls. Her investigation was more than idle curiosity. It was a crusade against the absurdity of an institution that pretended to control nonsense but was itself riddled with contradictions and corruption. Back inside the labyrinthine archives, Felix Grimble shuffled through piles of dusty folders. His colorful bow tie was slightly askew, and his spectacles slid down his nose as he uncovered a file marked with a cryptic symbol. The faded paper crackled under his fingers as he read, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, he whispered, eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and discovery. "Looks like the misplaced Mondays have more secrets than we thought." Felix's forgotten past as a magician and his uncanny knack for connecting seemingly unrelated dots made him an unexpected but vital player in the unfolding drama. As the day wore on, tension within the bureau became palpable. Harold's wavering allegiance began to leak into his interactions, causing unease among his colleagues. Eliza, ever the pragmatist, confronted him in a quiet office, the walls lined with thick volumes of regulations and licenses. "You don't have to do this, Harold," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions beneath. "We all want order, but not at the cost of everything that makes this bureau alive." Harold's shoulders sagged. "I feared that without strict control, everything will unravel. But maybe I've been looking at this all wrong." Meanwhile, Myra's protests grew bolder, drawing attention from the public and media alike. Juno's articles painted the bureau as a battleground between stifling order and liberating chaos, sparking debates in cafes, homes, and city halls. The bureau's fragile equilibrium was cracking, and as night fell, the clerks found themselves standing at a crossroads. Would they cling to the old ways, bound by rules and fear? Or would they embrace the unpredictable, the absurd, and the wonderfully impossible? The answer, like the bureau itself, was anything but certain. And as the shadows lengthened, the whispered conspiracies promised that the coming days would challenge everything they thought they knew about nonsense, order, and the delicate dance between them. The stage was set. The players, some unwilling, some inspired, were ready. The Bureau of Absurd Affairs was about to face its greatest trial yet, one that would test the limits of bureaucracy, friendship, and the very nature of absurdity itself. And in the quiet corners of its endless corridors, the question lingered. Could nonsense survive when threatened by the cold hand of logic? Only time, and perhaps a little madness, would tell.